Is My Teen Romantic Comedy Snafu the best romance anime? I'm the Wandering Albatross, and today is going to be the first of 3 parts in a video series that will be covering Snafu, and whether or not I actually think it is possibly the best romance anime, at least that I've ever seen. My Teen Romantic Comedy Snafu, also known as this long Japanese title, which is more directly translated into My Youth Romantic Comedy is Wrong as I Expected, but the proper US title is My Teen Romantic Comedy Snafu, or Snafu for short. Or it also is commonly known as Oregairu, which is like a short, term for the long Japanese title or something like that. I'm not exactly sure the origins of Oregairu, but it is another title it goes by. I'm going to be calling it a Snafu inside of this video and the rest of the series, though. I do want to encourage you guys to go out and see the 3rd season for yourself, or at least start the show for yourself before it's over, because if you don't know, it's currently running right now. I'm in the middle of watching the 3rd season as it's airing. The most recent episode I've seen is episode 10. Episode 11 has actually just come out. I just haven't seen it yet. I'm waiting for my friend that I'm watching the show with so that we can watch it together. However, I do really encourage you guys to go and jump out there and actually start watching the show. It's really fun. Everybody's in the middle of the hype right now, so it's a great time to go ahead and start watching. This video is going to be completely spoiler-free. This first part will be acting as the review segment, where it's completely spoiler-free. I won't spoil anything major about the show, besides just a generic premise of it. Then the subsequent video will be more diving into some of the general concepts about the show that I want to talk about that are more spoiler-related, so that's for people who've already seen the show. And then the 3rd part will actually be made after the whole thing is finished. So after I've seen the 3rd and final season, and whether or not I can come to the conclusion that it is in fact the best romance show that I've ever seen. Now, the 1st and 2nd part will be releasing on the same day, so if you've already seen the show, please watch this video. I will be generally covering some of my concepts and opinions of the show here, but it will still be viable, because I'm not going to be talking about the same stuff in the 2nd part. But then you can go on to the 2nd part. If you haven't seen it yet, just watch this part and then come back for the 2nd part after you've seen the show. Now, for a little bit of a backstory, if you will, for me and my romantic comedy dilemma, essentially, the romantic genre is always something that seems conceptually that should be really appealing to me. I'm a very romantic person myself. That's something that's always been a character trait of mine. However, I just have never latched onto the genre as a whole, and in particular in the live-action form. I think a lot of it is just really overdone, a lot of the same stuff that goes on there, and I was just never really enthralled with anything that I ever really came across, and I can't really think of any love stories that I actually genuinely like. But when it came to anime, that's actually my favorite genre in the entire medium of anime. Definitely struck me as profound, and I wasn't really expecting it, but I think it has a lot to do with a lot of the really relatable scenarios and situations they put some of the characters in, at least the good ones. There's obviously, stuff like harem anime. Don't really need to talk much about that. But there is a lot of really relatable situations and a lot of really interesting concepts that seem like there are things that you just don't really see brought up from the teenager perspective. In particular, you don't really get too many adult situations with anime. That is one thing that's a little lacking in that area. But there is a lot of really good stuff for the young adult variety, the teenager variety. There's a lot of really great storytelling there and a lot of really great perspective, some great insight, lessons to learn, but also just really makes you feel like you're not alone. In particular, I'll give a little mini shout out to Rent a Girlfriend. There's actually a show I've been watching right now. If you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend checking it out. It has a lot of super relatable situations I just have not seen any other anime bringing up. And I definitely will be making a video about that anime once it's actually all the way out and I can get it on DVD or Blu-ray. My Teen Romantic Comedy Snafu was the 2nd ever romance anime that I properly got into. Toradora was the first one. Loved Toradora. That was a great recommendation from one of my friends. I actually own it on DVD. And I've seen many countless romance animes since Snafu, but this one still holds the test of time, and I really do think it's my favorite out of all the ones I've seen. Now, it hasn't finished yet, so that is one thing that you do have to keep in mind. That's why there's the 3-part sequence to this whole exploration of whether or not it actually is the best romance anime. And yeah, that kind of gives you the general backstory about what my dilemma is with when it comes to romance anime. Now, getting into Snafu in particular, what is the story about? Well, it follows our main character named Hachiman Hikigaya. He's basically an outcast. He doesn't really have any friends, and he kind of thinks that everyone who likes school is either delusional or just plain out a liar. Because he just doesn't really see the value in it, and he's not really had a good history in romance himself. However, everything kind of takes a weird turn when his teacher, who's kind of fed up with all of his sarcasm, decides to put him into the service club. It only has one other member, that is Yukino Yukinoshita, and she is basically this really beautiful ice queen character who doesn't really have any friends herself, but for a completely different reason than Hachiman. But they definitely take a disliking towards each other and bump their heads quite a bit towards the beginning, but they both are in the service club together now, which basically means that they have to provide services to any students who ask it on the premises. It's kind of hard to explain in itself. It's really a unique club, but that's basically the general idea, is that they just have to provide services and help out fellow students on the campus who come to them and ask for it, or who are referred to there via a teacher themselves. And quickly, within the first episode as well, their first ever task is to help a girl named Yui Gahama, and she ends up becoming quite the character who really attaches herself to both Hachiman and Yukino, and actually ends up joining the club herself. And that is where the story really begins. That's all just in episode 1, so don't worry, I haven't really spoiled anything major of the story, because the real story is about this trio of characters, Hachiman, Yukino, and Yui, and what basically develops into a love triangle. And the single best love triangle I have ever seen in any story or medium, period. I have never seen a more well-balanced love triangle with two love interests that are so equal and on par to each other. It's just simply unheard of. I have never seen or heard of any story, just period, that has been able to match how good this love triangle is. Now, if that doesn't really fully sell you on it, I don't know what will. But it's definitely something you need to try out. Now, as a basic rundown, I'll go through each of what I think of all 3 seasons so far without any spoilers, just some general thoughts about each season, and then we'll kind of move on from there. Season 1, definitely the weakest season in my opinion. It has a very slow start. Episode 1 and 4 are pretty good and pretty interesting. 2 and 3 is kind of where it drags its butt like a dog on carpet there for a bit, because it doesn't really seem to grip anything, and it's kind of spinning its wheels, just kind of finding its place towards the beginning. I definitely think that's the weakest part of that season as a whole, but it still is very interesting and very funny. It has some great comedic elements to it. It has really good comedy and a really good style. I like the art style to season 1, and it is important to point out the art style of season 1 in particular, because they actually, all 3 seasons do change their art styles. In fact, season 1 came out in 2013, season 2 came out in 2015, and season 3 is coming out now in 2020. So big gap there, which could be something of a topic for a completely other video, but we're not going to waste your time with that. It has really unique scenarios for high school anime, or rom-coms in general. Like, it just has some unique scenarios I'm not going to really spoil, but definitely some things I have not seen in other romance animes, and as I went on and explored more of the romance and rom-com genre stuff, and just in the high school setting in general, definitely still stood up to having some pretty unique scenarios I haven't seen and any of the other ones. And yet again, great, believable love triangle. Very grounded, really great and believable, very interesting. I definitely would rate this first season as a solid A tier. Not quite S tier, but definitely A tier. And like I said, that slower beginning is really what kind of makes it drag its ass like a dog. But the rest of the show really picks up, especially after episode 6. If you're kind of like wondering, like I was when I first started out the show, I was kind of questioning whether or not I'd really latch onto this show, but by the time I got to episode 6, I was hooked. So just at least watch up until episode 6 before you actually make your decision whether or not you want to continue watching it or pull off of it. I know my usual thing is the 2-episode rule, but I think episode 1 is good enough to keep your interest, and then it's kind of slow there, but just hold with it, and you're definitely going to thank me afterwards. When it comes to Season 2, this is where you get a huge animation style difference. It's much sharper, much cleaner. You kind of lose some of these more comedic and interesting elements from the art style of the first season. The first season is much more cartoony looking and a lot more pastel, and it had quite a few interesting sequences, like whenever Hachiman would be thinking to himself or telling a story, it would go into this black and white sequence with like these weird grainy stuff on it that made it look like black and white film, and that was really funny, and it made it obvious that he was talking about something from his past. All those other like comedic visual elements are all gone in season 2. In its place are just fantastically beautiful visuals, like really sharp animation, really good animation that's just much more fluid than in season 1, and the color palette's beautiful, just beautiful vignettes, blending gradients of colors with just really vibrant different hues that you just don't see in this first season. I personally prefer the second one, but it doesn't really matter because the first season is much more comedic and a lot less drama heavy than season 2. Season 2 definitely focuses a little bit more on the drama of the story, and the visual art style reflects that. It's definitely more focused on the feels part of it rather than the comedy. But the comedy is still there, and trust me, the comedy is still really great. Love Triangle is still top tier. I think that the Love Triangle is brought up a serious notch from season 1. Very emotional, really interesting character development and motivations that you get with the characters in season 2. I think they bring them into some really interesting places. So yeah, in general, season 2 is definitely an S tier. That's where the show really reaches S tier for me. I mean, season 1 was pretty close, but yet again, it just really drags its ass towards the beginning of that. But season 2, really good quality stuff there. Definitely an S-tier show. When it comes to season 3, I'm going to briefly talk about what I've seen so far. Obviously, I haven't finished it, but season 3 is much more like season 2. Just in terms of storytelling, it's much more drama focused, definitely focusing a little bit more on the feels. The visual style is much more like season 2. There are some tiny differences. It's much more crisp, much more fluid than season 2, even though it's still mostly the same art style. In season 2, one thing I noticed that wasn't in season 1 was that the characters were given these like different colors to their hair towards the tip, like the females in particular. Like Yui Gahama's hair was this lighter peach pink color, and then down towards the tips it kind of became darker. And then Yukino, who usually has black hair, it had blue tips, just barely a little hint of blue towards the ends of her hair. Hachiman went from having a slightly greenish tinged hair to just having a slightly bluish tinged hair. All of the visual style is basically just a better, higher quality version of season 2. It continues amping up right off of the excitement of season 2. Season 2 ends on a serious high hype note. And season 3 just continues right off that. Usually you kind of like, each season kind of ends off at a certain point, and then when the next season comes in, you have like a little bit of a low area with the season starting up, so your tires are spinning just a little bit before you can get your grip and really take off the rest of the season. Season 3 really just starts right off at the end of season 2, and it just continues amping it up from there. So it's almost like just this constant amp from the beginning of season 2 all the way through season 3, and I think it's really well done. It definitely works best if you're kind of binge watching it from the first season all the way to the third. At least season 2 and 3, you binge watch it through there, and it just feels like you're blazing right through the story, like there wasn't even a break. Besides the slight visual discrepancies with better quality. And yeah, season 3 so far, S tier. Amazing show. I'm really loving season 3. I'm really have high hopes for the show as a whole. Obviously, it's not finished yet. I still have 3 more episodes to see before it's done. But this show is S tier overall for me. I know that there's a little bit weaker bit for season 1 in particular, but if you can get past that and get into the rest of stuff, especially season 2 and 3, you're really going to enjoy the ride. I think it's a really great show, and I really hope you guys give it a try if you haven't seen it already. I should note that I really do want to hear all your guys' opinions and stuff in the comment section below, but I am going to be turning off the comments on this video and part 2 because I don't want to get any spoilers for me for the rest of season 3, because I know some people have already seen the light novels and they might try to spoil it in the comments for myself and for everybody else. So for just the sake of everyone's sanity, the comments will be turned off. So just keep that in mind. Once the 3rd season's out and I've seen it all the way, I will be turning the comments back on so you guys can comment, and I will be replying to those. Now, I really do encourage you yet again to join in as soon as possible. Get on the hype train and start watching the show. It's on Crunchyroll, so you can watch the whole show on Crunchyroll. And I don't know if it's... what else it's on, but I know it's on Crunchyroll, and you can watch it for free with advertisements, or if you have a Crunchyroll subscription, you can watch it without advertisements, so there's a great option for you. Now, part 2 will be releasing on the same day as this video, so it's already out. That video is going to be covering a little bit more spoiler stuff and discussing a little bit more in depth some really cool concepts I love about the show. So if you've already seen the show, please move on to that video and join me over there. If you haven't seen the show yet, please get off your butt, watch it, come back and watch part 2. Thank you guys so much for watching, and keep wondering.